You've got it. You better stop it. Ooh. You've got it. You've got it.
We are excited to welcome Caroline Paul to the podcast today. Caroline is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Gutsy Girl, Escapades for Your Life of Epic Adventure, and Lost Cat, a true story of love, desperation, and GPS technology, which has been translated into 15 languages. She's also the author of the memoir Fighting Fire, the middle grade book You Are Mighty, A Guide to Changing the World, and the novel East, Wind, Rain. Her TED Talk, To Raise Brave Girls, Encourage Adventure, has been viewed over 2 million times. A longtime member of the Writers Grotto, she lives in San Francisco. Her latest book is Tough Broad, From Boogie Boarding to Wing Walking, How Outdoor Adventure Improves Our Lives as We Age, and came out in March. You know, Caroline, in full disclosure, is an old friend of ours. And what I loved about this conversation was sort of a different sort of approach and perspective on things to think about as we age, to have a healthy, happy body and mind as we get older.
Yeah, you know, so much of the conversation around longevity feels like it's become very quantified.
Yeah,
I take
very
this,
technical.
I take this, I get this blood panel, I do this thing. And I think what I love about this is that she leads with, let's go have adventure. And she's specifically talking about women in this book. I'm sure it can be applied to both genders,
Yes.
all genders. But adventure will cover a lot of the basics and the basis that makes for a durable, amazing body and a brain that's capable of going the distance.
Yeah, I mean, it provides purpose and novelty and community and, you know, all this sort of sensory stuff that we get from being outside that's so good for our brain health. And also, I think the important thing is, you know, she's really highlighting the importance of actually doing things that are fun.
Yeah, in a community of people. And Caroline is gnarly. She
Yeah.
is a superstar athlete. She's been first on so many things in terms of firefighting and adventuring. And I love that, you know, even through that, we know her as like a gnarly, you know, badass person, but the filter through which she approaches this, it's really accessible. And as you and I have crested 50, and we're starting to run into friends who are starting to get older, I think this book is topical and really does fit sort of a missing piece in this great conversation of what is required for us to be healthy, happy people as we age.
Yeah, and I think she really expanded her own and the general definition of what adventure means.
Yeah.
And so I think adventure can be for everybody, regardless of your interests and tastes. And I learned a ton, and it was really great to hear this very unique perspective on healthy aging from Caroline Paul.
Caroline is a great writer. I love this book. We know you're going to enjoy this conversation with her.
Caroline Paul, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
I am so excited to be here, you guys.
So
Nice to see you.
Yeah,
Nice to
I
see you. So
know.
in full disclosure to our listeners, you happen to be the best friend of one of my dearest friends, Beth Rippins. And so we've known each other for years. We've even been lucky enough to take a river trip together. And have obviously been around each other and seen each other over the years and have known
30
each other
years,
for
I
so
think.
long. I think 30 years.
I've known
Yeah.
Beth
Well,
for almost 40, so I.
Yeah.
I'm 27. How does that work?
Anyway, we're delighted to have you on to talk all things Caroline Paul, but particularly congratulations on your new book, Tough Broad, which is amazing. Kelly and I were lucky enough to get a copy of it, you know, I think a couple months ago, and have had a chance to read it. And I think it's so topical and so timely. So congratulations on another amazing piece of work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's just dive right in. Why this book and why now? What inspired you to write it?
Well, I was actually I'm 60 now, but at around 55, I started looking around and realizing that I didn't see women my age doing what I was doing. So in particular, I remember being out at Ocean Beach on a surfboard, and I'm not a good surfer. I'm a very good paddler. But there's a lot of people who are so much better than me and my age, but they weren't out there on the water. There were men my age and older, but no women. And the same was for when I was on my electric skateboard, or I fly an experimental plane. And I just didn't see, maybe one or two other women, but not a lot. And yet there were men my age. And so I started thinking about my own future. 60 was sort of blinking on the horizon. And I was wondering, like, well, maybe I should be pulling back. Like, but I had a feeling that outdoor adventure was important for us, but I wanted to know for sure. And so it was kind of a question of why aren't women out here with me, but also should I even be out here? And so this book is kind of a quest.
I love it. And I want to dive into the details, but I assume the answer was yes, you should be out there. And yes, women your age and plenty older should also be out there. But we'll get into that. So before we do that, though, I'd love to just talk a little bit about your background, because you are such an amazing athlete, and you just mentioned a few things you've been doing. I don't want to go back to the arc of your entire life, but you've been someone who's moving, been outside, been athletic your entire life. So
And
maybe
even potentially the only woman in the room for a long time.
yeah. And so I don't know, I would love to just, have our listeners get to know you a little bit as Caroline Paul. What have you been, you're an author, a journalist, but you also are someone who's been moving and using your body in some pretty amazing ways your whole life. So I don't know if that means start at childhood or start at adulthood, but wherever you want to go, let our listeners know, where you're coming from.
Well, I do want to start off by saying thank you for saying I'm athletic, but I would say I'm someone who puts myself in athletic situations, but I'm actually really an average sort of athlete. I'm not, but the one thing I am is very dogged. I have an identical twin sister, and I think that really throughout my life made for both of us sort of want to be better, or we had sort of a measuring stick where we could see someone that we admired do something and we wanted to do it more. Actually, honestly, we kind of wanted to do it the same because we hated to be compared. So, but my twin sister, of course, she does amazing feats of swimming mostly. She's outside a lot, but not really adventure. So we grew up outside. And we grew up with that kind of feral childhood that a lot of us had in the 60s and 70s, where we were pretty much told to go outside till it was dark and figure out ways to play. So that meant biking, sledding, swimming, skateboarding. And we weren't great at it. We just did it. And also, I think I also had parents who wanted us to do a lot of different things, and that included outdoor things, because they just wanted us to be well-rounded. It wasn't for our character. It wasn't for us to learn resilience like I think we would do now. I don't even know if that vocabulary was around then.
No.
Yeah, right?
No.
Let me ask you this. So much of, our daughters, and I'm so grateful that they get to model some really extraordinary people, but also particularly there's a group of women around that I'm like, look, if you can't see what's possible, it's too late for you, But were your parents models? Did your mother, did you have aunties like this? Or did you just fall into a cadre of people who are like, we're going this way and we think this is the right thing?
We had no role models as women. I looked at other men because I loved being outside and I loved having adventure. And we got National Geographics like a lot of us did. That was sort of our internet at the time. They were all lined up on our shelves, those yellow spines, and I read every single one. And it was the adventurers. It was Dave Brashears. It was, I can't remember his name, but he did that. I called it the Tomato across the Pacific. He rowed a boat across it. All these sort of incredible wild adventures that sparked my attention. I mean, there was Amelia Earhart, but that was it, basically. Wow. Now, since I have written books and done research on women in the outdoors, specifically for Gutsy Girl, my last book about this sort of subject, there were actually quite a few women, there weren't quite a few, but there were some notable women who were outside doing adventurous things like climbing in the Himalayas in the 1800s, riding motorcycles, in the 1940s across the United States. But they were never lauded. They were never held up because it wasn't ladylike. So I didn't have any role models like that. And my parents were not outdoorsy people at all, but we were in the country. And so they just let us run wild. And we learned a lot ourselves, besides, of course, being given a sled and given a bike. we were lucky enough to have that. But no, there were no role models at the time.
And as became an adult, I know you have done a variety of different things, many of which involve planes, which for me would be like a solid no. Like I am very adventurous and want to try a lot of scary things, especially in water, as you know. But I don't enjoy a small plane. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in winged environments, because I know it's a lot of things.
I do think, actually, I do credit. Well, again, like there were no female role models. There were role models, obviously, that I picked and choose for adventure. But there was Amelia Earhart, frankly. And so, as I think a young girl at the time, I thought, yeah, okay, flying is something I could do. And I had a newspaper job, and I started paying for lessons, and my parents helped because they thought, oh, this is cute. I mean, part of it is that as a woman back then, we were very underestimated. So the expectations were not that high. And in some ways, that gave us a lot of latitude. That gave us this unexpected freedom. I think it was harder for my brother because there were these expectations. So free of those expectations and sort of just a pat on the head and, okay, if you want to do that. I took flying lessons at 20. And I didn't actually like small planes because I found them boring. It was like kind of driving a car in the air. So but I loved flying. I loved the perspective it gave me. And so I became a paraglider for many years, which is, when you sort of inflate basically a bed sheet. So say the hang gliders and all the flying community on land, and then you take a couple steps off and you're flying. And I did that for many years around the world. But I think I got a little tired of what we called para-waiting, which was waiting for the wind to be just right because the range was pretty small. And, it's nature. That's what adventures are. It doesn't always just happen like this. But I got impatient. I was also injured from being a firefighter in San Francisco. And I thought it might be safer not to be landing on my legs. So I picked up motorized hang gliders for many years. And then for the book, I learned how to fly an experimental gyrocopter.
Wow. Okay. There's 10 questions I have in there. What is an experimental gyrocopter? I'll just start there since that was the last one.
It's something that your, loved ones don't want you to fly. It looks like a tiny little helicopter. It's open cockpit, which is, all I ever want to fly is something that has definitely I'm kind of sad even about the motor, but if you want to be flying fairly often, motors make it easier. So it looks like a tiny helicopter.
I just have to point out when you said the para-waiting, or I think that was the phrase you used. I think Kelly can probably relate to that in his own surfing journey, actually. It's not that convenient for us to surf where we live, and he likes to surf. But he found that with limited time, he often would make quite an effort to drive far to get into the ocean, to wait around for 2 or 3 hours and surf like 1 or 2 waves, right? And so we may get to a point in our lives where we have a little more time and that calculus makes sense.
Nope,
but,
no, I don't.
But
There's not
mostly
enough time
Kelly
for that.
did a lot of waiting around surfing, right?
One of the things I love is you find a field maybe that there is a model in, or at least there's not sort of, or maybe you did feel resistance in this flight field, but you really are, and you and Julietta are of Title IX generation, where you really are going first, and we're continually seeing. We have friends who are contemporaries who are the first women to do something, the first woman to surf Mavs, the first woman to get something done.
First ascents of all my whitewater friends.
Right. We have friends who are the first woman strength and conditioning coach in Major League Baseball. Like, we're still of a generation. We saw that movie about the first all women around the world team. That was 1992. They couldn't find a sponsorship.
Team. Yeah.
They couldn't find a sponsorship because they thought all the women would die. Right. So, for me, it seems very common or very all the women in my life have always been adventurers. I just was like, oh yeah, of course these women are better than I am. All these things, I should follow them. I should have followed you down the line a few times.
Fact.
Do you does it feel like it's an active verb to be first? Because I think what you stumble on here, and I want to get to the heart of what I think is so important about this book, especially as counterpoint to what we're seeing in like the very formal medicalized Western edition of longevity, which feels very tech bro. It feels very tactical. And then we have this sort of adventure play model where you're seeing that we're getting all of the things that we need when we go do things and play in the outdoors with other people. Do you always feel like it was you always swimming up into a headwind, or if you just once you decided there was a tailwind kind of pushing you along these outdoor adventures?
Well, let me just go back to the first just quickly, is that I happened to have a lot of firsts too when I was young, and thinking it was really that was sort of my goal. And I have to say, I didn't enjoy outdoor adventure like I do now. And I'm not sure if it was necessarily because it was such a competitive, like, I'm going to be first at this. And there was this sort of hard way of approaching outdoor adventure, or it was just being young. I actually think it was just being young. It was hard to enjoy things personally, just because I was young, full of angst, full of all those things that when you're young. But a lot of the reasons that there were firsts to be had is because the equipment was changing, as we know, with rafting. That's why I did a lot of first descents, because I happened to be there at the right time and be not necessarily experienced, but someone would go, well, she's not going to back out. We know that about her. She's not going to be
Dogged.
right. And I was probably the first to mountain bike through the Bolivian Andes, because no one else had just done it yet. It's not because I was good. Me and a friend just went and did it in 1987, and no one had seen a mountain bike there. So, and I like to like silently chalk up these firsts. And then, Beth and Sue Norman and I went to Croatia. We didn't think we were going to be first to be paddling to these islands in a sea kayak. But back then, they just didn't, outdoor adventure was not a thing. And people had been in kayaks, but they'd never done it to these specific islands. So that's another. But now, and definitely they told us when we put our boats in the water, they're like, you're going to paddle to that island? That's, X amount of miles away. You can't do that. And we'd be like, why? And basically they said, because you're girls. And so, yeah, of course, there's this headwind when you're trying to be first, but that's part of the reason you probably want to do it. But it didn't make outdoor adventure, super fun for me. And I think sort of where I am now, I want to be the same adventurer I was, but I'm just not. I don't need to be first in anything. I'm proud of that. I don't think I was special. I think I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and willing and brave. But the women in this book, I specifically didn't want to talk to older women who were really, really good at what they did. I wanted to talk to women who had discovered outdoor adventure and seen the gifts it could offer. Maybe they discovered it early, maybe they discovered it late, but they weren't, there, racking up firsts or, some major awards.
So, getting into and I do want to talk about some of the women in particular in the book, and have you tell some stories about them. But before we do that, I'd just love to go back to what Kelly and I were talking about earlier, which is because of our book, Built to Move, and the community we're in, we spend a lot of time talking about longevity, aging well, health span, creating a durable body. And in many cases, we're spending time talking about sleep and resistance training and nutrition and, a lot of the sort of, pillars of health and longevity that
we were just at Stanford at the Lifestyle Medicine Conference, and there's no conversation of this there.
But you have some other pillars of what you call fulfilling aging, and I would love it if you could tell the listeners about what those are, because I think that they're they're a bit different than the sort of pillars of healthy aging that we're often talking about in this context and in sort of the longevity space generally.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything about fulfilling aging. I didn't even consider myself that old. I was 55. It just so happened that I got, and by the way, a lot of my friends were super like bummed about getting older, and I wasn't. I was kind of psyched. And I will say that is because of my mom. She really blossomed at 40. She left my dad. She got a boyfriend. She like found herself, and then 50, and then 60. And I was like, oh, aging is going to be really cool. And so I was actually just going to jump headlong into interviewing women in the outdoors because I did have a sense, obviously, that outdoor adventure was good for us. I mean, I wanted it to be good for us because I wanted to keep adventuring. And I also saw my mom, who at 60 started bicycling after really a life that was not outdoorsy at all. And that really changed her. I mean, she became more confident, more emotive. She certainly became more affectionate with me. It was really eye-opening. And so I was I was curious, like I knew there was something there. But then the pandemic hit just as I was starting interviews. So I couldn't interview anyone. So what I ended up doing, and I was really going to jump in with just saying like, how's outdoor adventure? Isn't it fun? I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was kind of lucky that the pandemic happened because I had to do a lot of research on fulfilling aging. And so I started to realize the things that are really holding us back as women. And one of those things was, well, I'll tell you that there were things that I came upon, those pillars that you're talking about, I really came upon as I was doing the interviews. But the thing that I was really interested in initially from the beginning is our mindset about aging and how that affects how well we age. And I started to see a lot of research on that because I was, again, aware because my friends were so negative about it. And yet I was so positive about it. So the research is basically that if you have a negative view on aging, you're have a better chance of a cardiac issue earlier, cognitive decline earlier. And the opposite is true. If you think that aging is vitalizing and exhilarating and full of exploration and adventure, you are going to have a healthier and happier aging journey. And you live 7.5 years longer, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So,
And there's a lot of power to shred when you're
Yeah,
in your
and
50s and 60s.
before you go on, because I want to link to it in the show notes, I want to shout out to your very recent New York Times column about your mom taking up biking. So congratulations. And for anyone listening, we'll link to that in the show notes for sure, because it was very cool to see your name in there.
I just recognize that is your daughter or one of your daughters going to be like, my mom picked up bike packing at age 50. Julie just got back from a week-long bike packing trip with our friend Rebecca Rush.
Oh, whoa. That's not just bike packing. That's like bike packing at high speed. And
That's extreme bike packing. Yeah.
Whereas I went bike packing on an electric bike.
Amen. I
Kelly's like, that's how I want to go bike packing. Anyway, well, yeah, tell us, I mean, that 7-year number is pretty striking. That is significant.
That doesn't even tell the whole story because the people in here are engaged in community. They're taking risk. They're outside. They're sun. They're adventure. They're risking things. That's not just 7 years in a nursing home. You know what I mean? Like those 7 years,
those
it's
are
easy
potentially
to discount
quality
that.
years.
That's right. It really does make a difference.
Well, that was what was interesting to me because it's all fine and good to say have a positive attitude, but how do you get that attitude? And I really had a feeling that outdoor adventure would be covering all the aspects that we needed to feel good about aging that would then give us this positive outlook. It would be this virtuous cycle. And so, and again, books are written chronologically, but a lot of the realizations might come later and you got to kind of plug it in the beginning and the introduction. And I think, though I never actually in the book sort of enumerate, these are the 5 pillars of healthy aging. This is what you will come out with when you read the book, which is that you need community, you need purpose, you need novelty, you need health, physical and emotional, and finally, this positive mindset. And, a lot of those tenets are we all know about, community, obviously important, something that often falls away as we age. Health, obviously, you guys understand that. And, but I think that the new idea is that if you go outside, and especially as a woman, because I think men have different challenges, but as a woman, you will be able to access all these attributes in one fell swoop in a really powerful way. You'll embody these. And that's what really made me realize that outdoor adventure, it's not just fun, it's actually incredibly vital for us as we age.
So the other piece that really resonates with me is the novelty piece, and I think it's so connected to this outdoor adventure piece. And we had Dr. Tommy Wood, who's a neuroscientist, on our podcast, and I think we took a lot of really interesting things on health, the brain and healthy aging, brain health from that podcast. But one of the most memorable things I think we all took away and have talked about since is this novelty idea in terms of brain health and healthy aging, that it is really critical. And it's sort of like you can kill two birds with one stone in those pillars by finding some kind of outdoor activity / adventure, and especially if it's something you've never done before. And then you can also sort of check the box on the novelty piece.
Well, yeah, because there's something about the outdoors itself that is always uncertain, where you're always learning. I mean, you can, put your mind to a task that you want to learn, and then it's done, and then the novelty's done. But I feel like going outside, it's new every single time.
So what is the research actually saying about the going outside and adventure piece? I mean,
Nothing. There is no research. There is none.
Right.
I mean, really,
So-
I just had to kind of cobble it together. I mean, there's clearly research on how good it is to actually be outside. I mean, they had a study that I mentioned in the book where they studied 400,000 cross-country skiers from one of the Scandinavian countries, and they saw that they had markedly lower anxiety rates, and they concluded that that was because of the exercise. And my question was, whoa, yeah, sure, for sure, exercise helps, but how come you didn't consider the outdoor aspect of cross-country skiing? One of the most vitalizing sports, not just physically, but you're out there in the cold. A lot of things you don't know how the snow is. You're constantly having to adapt. So there is that I could find. I mean, there are studies on like throwing your young people out in the outdoors and how that is important to sort of rewire your brain. So I think that what I had to do is just sort of cobble stuff together and make it apply to us as older women. And it does. And it really does.
It's interesting. We had a whitewater kayaking camp for kids with HIV and AIDS for 10 years. It was like a leadership school. And our kids would go back and they would have better blood tests, better health outcomes. And all we did was kayak for a week. We made them, we had to cook.
Slept outside.
We slept outside. We kayaked. That's all we did. And we didn't have to manipulate anything. Like we weren't the magus, we weren't talking about our feelings. But our kids went back and became advocates, and they were just changed. And our doctor at the time was the head of infectious disease for the NIH, pediatric infectious disease. And he said, hey, you should look at this field of psychoneuroimmunology. And it turns out that being outside, and we're finding now that the average adult is spending 120 minutes outside a week, right? And so there are all these cofactors. Was it the adrenaline? Was it being, cooking for each other? Was it just being in sunshine? Who knows what the thing is? But one of the things that I love about this is that it seems like you've constrained the environment and constrained the behaviors. Like I was just saying to Juliet with her bike ride, she's just back this weekend. And I was like, you were 80 miles out with your friend and there's no way to get out. You had to solve that problem. Like you would put yourself into a position where like, well, now I guess I got to ride home. If I want to get out of here, I got to get out of here.
I got to ride or hike.
And some of this, I mean, you don't have to do that to go for a backpack weekend or learn a new skill outside or swim in the surf. But it really is, you can just constrain a whole bunch of these behaviors where you don't have to set up all of the other things to follow along. It's just you do the thing, and as you're pointing out, there's this unique aspect underneath that's just hidden in these outdoor adventures, which I can relate to because I feel like it shaped my whole life.
I mean, there's so much science on, first of all, just being outside. In terms of immunology or our immune system, our cortisol, our stress chemicals. I mean, you guys are way more schooled in all this than I am. This was all really new to me.
Juliet's an attorney. I'm a physical therapist, just so we're clear. We're
Yeah, we're
not.
dilettantes.
We're dilettantes.
You're New York Times bestselling authors on all this stuff. So when I went and interviewed Dot Fisher-Smith, who's 93 at the time, and she was this hiker, and I really thought I was going out there to investigate, walking outside as an activity that we could all do as we age, kind of an adaptable activity. A lot of these things, I have to say that, I went in calling them adventure, but initially I was like, yeah, it's not really adventure. I mean, I am someone who likes to jump off cliffs. So when walking outside, bird watching, another thing I did, I have to say that I was not humble. I was not even, luckily I was a little open, but I was like, yeah, this isn't really adventure, but I want to get people outside of all ilks. And then I go and I realize, oh no, this is adventure. This has all the hallmarks. It has all the rhythms of adventure. It has exhilaration. It has a quest. It has, long stretches of boredom, frankly, and so when I went to interview Dot, I was just there to understand how walking, that physical movement, would be good for us. And instead, I found out so much of the science about the wilderness and outside and how it's good for us, our well-being, our emotional and physiological well-being. Just as crazy as just the fact that the lines are all rounded. It's not this hard lines of an urban environment. Clearly noise issues. It's so much quieter. Birdsong has been found to lower our stress chemicals. The tree chemicals they've done. In other countries, they subsidize trails through the wilderness or through
Forest bathing.
Forest bathing, exactly, or the power trail in I think it's Norway, where they this is a public service where they have trails with signs that say stop, look, listen, breathe, and all this. The most interesting part, and maybe you'll understand it better, is this idea of fractals and how nature's shapes reflect the actual construction of our eye, so that when our brain is taking it in, it just doesn't have to work as hard. And that's really calming for us. We just have so much of this background noise that's happening. So, I got so excited, I forgot my train of thought. But basically, that I would go on these investigations thinking I was just going to be looking at one thing, and this whole other aspect of the outdoors would open up to me. And so maybe that's to your point about like outdoor adventure. Yeah, I found out that on a really holistic level, it's just so good for us.
One of the things that I think we appreciate as we've gotten older is people who are curious. Is curiosity part of that sort of through narrative on all of these extraordinary people that you talk to?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So many of these women did not have an outdoor background. And yet, so for instance, I went to San Diego to look at a group of women who were boogie boarding in the Pacific Ocean. Again, went a little bit like, I'm a surfer, like boogie boarding, that's for kids. But, it's good. It's good on the bones or whatever. I went because I knew that it probably held some key, because there are all these women, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, were doing this together in the water. And this one woman told me about how during the pandemic, she was on the beach and she saw these women, and she didn't have any outdoor background. She didn't even like swimming, even though she had been a swimmer in high school. She'd never been in the ocean of any note, even though she lived in San Diego. But she saw these women and they looked like they were having so much fun that she thought, and I'll just try it. And immediately she was hooked. Just that step of like, I'll just try it. And it opened up her world. She completely upended everything she thought about herself through this one activity of boogie boarding with a group of like-minded enthusiasts 3 days a week down in San Diego.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Element. And, I just got back from a epic bikepacking trip with Rebecca Rush in Arizona.
Typically we use Element. I'm drinking a hot Element right now. We use this sort of hydration during the day. This is one of of course we use it on our bike rides. And I've had a couple now elite mountain bikers, World Cup mountain bikers, be like, we discovered Element, this is really amazing. It's allowed us to better separate hydration from nutrition. But this is the first time you had to really lean into, am I getting enough salts? Because you've been riding the bike for 8 hours. How'd that go?
It went really well. And what was interesting is that even though we were on our bikes for literally 8 hours a day, it has the weird side effect of you actually don't feel that hungry. So you sort of have to remind yourself to keep eating and snacking because you just, at least in my case, I sort of lost the motivation to eat. But the other thing is most of the food that you can bring out there on an event like that is really sweet stuff, like sweet bars and sweet goos and gels.
You're carrying everything
carrying literally everything
4
for 4 days. And it was such a nice respite from all that sweet stuff to actually have my bottle filled with Element, salty Element. It was just ultimately super palatable, easy to get down.
Yeah, and I just cannot stress enough. I just saw an interview with a world-class ultra marathoner who's eating a gram of salt an hour. That's the output over the course of 6 or 7 hours. It's a gram of salt an hour. I don't think, yes, salt your food, you're fine. But if you're going long or hard or skiing all day long, or you're having a big adventure, chances are you're not getting enough salt.
Well, the other thing about this trip that was crazy is that we were in the Arizona desert, so we actually had to carry all of our water and be really mindful with our water. So we couldn't just drink as much water as we wanted. So we really also wanted to make sure that we were actually going to absorb the water we were drinking because we couldn't carry a bunch of water and just pee all that water
You're
back out.
saying having that isotonic solution just made it.
Yeah, I felt confident that I was actually really utilizing the water that I was drinking and carrying on my back as well.
Not just drinking that gallon a day and being like, why is my pee so clear?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, check it out, everyone. If you want to check this out for yourself, go to our link, drinkelement.com. That's LMNT, drinkelement.com/TRS. Get yourself a free sample pack with all the Element flavors. Do it. We literally drink it every day.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Momentous. And what we want to talk to you about today is our go-to sleep supplement, which is magnesium L-threonate.
Yeah, there have been a plethora of magnesii over the years. I think we first became aware with Balco and ZMA, right? Zinc and magnesium aspartate. And then since then, what we've recognized is, that magnesium can help you get into deep sleep and stay there a little bit longer. And it's a mineral, it's not habit forming. Most people are magnesium deficient anyway, is what I understand. And if you're highly stressed all the time, you're going through your magnesium.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that we take with us when we travel. And, if we had to eliminate all supplements from our life, I think if we could just choose one, I think magnesium before bed would be at the very tippy top of our list. There's lots of different types of magnesium, and I think generally speaking, they're all fine. The deal with magnesium L-threonate is that it apparently is the one that does the best job of piercing through the blood-brain barrier.
Let's say crossing. I don't think I want
crossing,
my blood-brain pierced. It's pierced like a septum piercing. The key here is that the molecule is small, actually developed by Stanford and proven at Stanford to actually, like you say,
cross the blood-brain
so it affects
barrier.
the brain a little bit differently. And I think that's really what we're seeing is that you can bind this magnesium to this different molecule. This molecule is a little smaller and it works a little bit better. So look, I think this thing is safe. You probably need it if you're an athlete and stressed. Give it a shot. It's pretty remarkable. Oftentimes, my friend Jesse Burdick says he feels like he's being tranked. He's like, the magnesium hits, and he's like, what is happening? And it's just that the magnesium is kicking in.
Yeah, and I agree with him. And we think there's some other sleep supplements I've taken over the years that may be helping my overall sleep, but I don't necessarily notice that. And I definitely notice a difference when I do or don't take magnesium. So
and people have been doing this forever. You don't even have to give yourself diarrhea with Magnacalm anymore, right? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Right? Where you just titrate up, and then you're like, ooh, too much. So this is so simple. I'm so grateful we've got it down to an easy way to improve your sleep and improve your recovery, magnesium L-threonate. If you want to learn more, go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS for 20% off your first purchase.
That's the power of getting pitted. Pitted.
So we've moved. This may be a bit of a rewind, but I really, as I was reading through the book, I was struck by you pointing out that there's a specific perception about aging women, that we become less competent physically and then also less interesting. And I thought that was particularly, right? I think that I immediately was like, yes, the less competent physically makes sense to me, but also less interesting. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and what you learned and why we got here.
Listen to your peers. They're women in particular are saying, I feel invisible to the culture after a certain age. You know, the kids are no longer in the house. Probably they're probably either retiring or at the apex of their career anyway. Apex is at the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
And their looks are changing. So all these things that we've been valued for are no longer or are changing. And we have no new identity to step into. I noticed, that in the media, the men at least get these sort of, they got Indiana Jones, last year or 2 years ago, still running through the tombs. And I think Harrison Ford is like 75.
He is.
We don't get anything like that. If someone was 75, they'd be either dying in the movie or the grandmother. There isn't a lot of cultural identities that were offered after a certain age. In fact, there's nothing. There's a big leap. My twin sister said this. She's an actress. She said that, up until a certain age, you're playing, after 25, you start playing moms. And then after 40, there's nothing for you. You're not a mom anymore because you're too old, which is hilarious.
Yeah, that's crazy. Since all my friends had babies after 40.
You're I don't know, you're playing the grandmother? I don't know. There's this big, and then I think at a certain age again, maybe 75, then they found a place to slot you. Now you're the grandmother or the great grandmother. And so there's this sort of empty space. And we believe too that we're no longer interesting. Lorraine, the woman I interviewed for Boogie Boarding, said she retired from her job and she felt like she was of no use anymore.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to that purpose piece. Our purpose doesn't always have to be caring for others or professional, right? Our purpose can be adventure and fun.
Well, I went scuba diving with Louise Holy, who's 80, and I was so intimidated. I was so intimidated. I hadn't scuba dove for a long time, even though I dove for the fire department 20 years ago. I still didn't feel at all that I could keep up with this with Louise, who I found through this nonprofit called Clean Up the Lake Tahoe. It was Tahoe. I think it's called Clean Up the Lake. And it was Lake Tahoe, Lake Tahoe is incredible.
Deep.
It's not only deep, it's so cold. It's not Pacific Ocean cold. It's way colder. It's so difficult to dive there. And so I interviewed Louise, and she does a lot of work for these nonprofits, picking up trash, or counting the stipe on kelp to understand kelp health. She goes in the ocean, does this great outdoor adventure, but she also does citizen science.
Yeah, and there's that purpose again.
Yeah, there's
Love
that
it.
purpose.
There's a lot of women in my life who I've gotten to know through the context of the adventure sports that we fell into. So I feel like there's this context that something stuck. You hinted at the woman who was boogie boarding. And by the way, everyone, I've gotten more shacked boogie boarding than I have any other time, like the most covered up time of all time. So respect. There was a sort of a conflict moment, and that was the pandemic for her. Do you feel like a lot of the people in here had a conflict moment where there was something changed in their lives, or is it just that we got older and we discovered this? Or because what I'm trying to think is, how might we prepare these conversations? I'm watching my mom, who was just, and we moved to Europe when I was a kid. She was always paddling. We always skied together. And as she's gotten older, she's now walking a little bit, but a lot of her adventureness is taken away, and her life has become a lot more sort of streamlined here. But how can we, do you think, sort of start to prepare ourselves earlier? Is it just that hopefully we're in our 20s and we're rad, and then we continue to be rad, or is this an active verb?
Not many of the women I happened to interview had been rad all their life. Sue Norman, I think, our mutual friend, Sue Norman. I have a posse of really strong female friends who are still doing stuff. And I didn't want to interview my friends for for many reasons. Stressful, because you want to make sure that you do them right. Um, but also I felt like they were such anomalies. Again, I am of the Title IX generation, but 1972, I was 9. So but yes, of course, I think I'm a good example of having done it all my life and I want to keep at it. But a lot of the women that I interviewed, let's say Sean Brokeman, who's a base jumping, one of the most dangerous sports in the world. She started at 40. She didn't have a background. She's African American. The outdoors has honestly never been welcoming to people of color and women, but people of color as well. And certainly the outdoor industry has not, made it seem like being outdoors is, they just didn't market their wares to people of color until very, very recently. So, but Sean went outside because she became a base jumper because her husband kind of wanted to skydive. And so he bought her skydiving lessons for her birthday, as couples often do, buy presents they want to do themselves. She just said yes. And I think that saying yes it can be a very small inflection point. And then now she's a base jumper. She also has a big outdoors life, mostly because of her husband introduced everything to her. He's white. He introduced all this to her. And now she's she does heli skiing. She, sea kayaks in Hawaii, or all this sea kayaks off the coast here. She's just a superhero. But I would say that it's about saying yes, and it's about understanding that adaptability is possible. And I went bird watching with Virginia Rose, who's in a wheelchair, and she's been in a wheelchair since she was 14. But she brings people out who, this is an extreme example, of course, who are in wheelchairs and have other disabilities. She has a nonprofit called Birdability, and that just shows that, again, that you can get outside. It's just about understanding your own limitations but with a positive mindset, with an expansive mindset, that you can do a lot, because again, you can probably do more than you want.
And you've given a bunch of examples, but I'm hoping maybe you can give some more, because I think there's probably going to be plenty of people listening to this who are like, I don't relate to doing outdoor activities at all. Right. It's like not me. It's not my vibe. I would never go rafting or climbing or base jumping, but you have interviewed hikers, bird watchers, boogie boarders. What are the sort of other kind of easy entry activities, even if it's not people you interviewed, just, or people you considered interviewing, or that you see that you think might be things people would want to consider if they're like, okay, I get it. I'm on board. I think maybe some adventure in my life, especially as I age, would be beneficial. Where do people start if they just do not relate to outdoor activities at all?
Well, it's possible you'll be that rare person who just will hate it so much that you'll never go outside. I just don't believe it, because if you bring your friends or someone that you love or admire, that automatically is interesting. It's like taking pills. We don't like taking our pharmaceuticals, but your doctor says you should do it, and people do it. They do it even with side effects that are terrible. So I don't really buy the fact that someone's like, I don't really want to go outside. I just think they don't understand just how vitalizing it is. That I really believe that. So Vijaya Srivastava was told by her doctor when she was 68 that her numbers needed to change. I don't remember specifically, but I think it was high blood pressure, sugars, maybe her weight. And she was like, she had no outdoor experience at all. Really, she didn't even walk outside. She had been born in India, and then when she did come to the United States, she told me that badminton was the only thing that she did when she was a kid, and maybe hardly at all. Like it just wasn't part of her life. And when she moved to the United States, she went to places with lots of snow, and she said it was pretty, but you don't go outside. So she moved to California, and her doctor says this, and turns out she had a pool in her condominium complex. So and she was petrified, like a lot of us are who don't swim, of drowning. Very smart thing to be scared of if you don't swim, drowning. But she decided, okay, I mean, I guess well, actually, her doctor said, what about your pool? And she's like, I don't swim. And she said, well, what about lessons? Like keep pushing. And so Vijaya, who's got a great sense of humor and a really charismatic personality, curious, open, fun. Oh, and she had been seeing kids in the pool, and it did look like they were having fun. But again, she didn't think it was for her. But now her doctor said this one thing, like, well, you need to start exercising. What about your pool? So she asked a friend, and her friend, who was also 68, said, okay. And they embarked on this journey that was transformative. And when I met her, she was like a real swimmer. She had the little swimming goggles and the swimming, whatever, long coat that the real swimmers wear. And she met me at her pool, and we went swimming together. It changed her. From there, she became a hiker. She took up yoga. She started doing all these things because, again, when she took that small step, it upended a lot of what she thought she could and could not do, and opened up her life. At 68, she's now 74.
I think one important piece here that I'd love to get more of your perspective on is just the fun aspect. Because, Kelly and I love training in the gym. Like, we're nerds. We love the gym. We love to weightlift. We love to do gym stuff. But even still, even with our love of gym stuff, we also both have like a strong
Gym
desire.
stuff sounds dirty, by the way.
We really have a strong desire to like be outside and do adventures, as you know, we've done some with you. But I think part of that is that it's just fun. And it's fun to be outside and try new things and, learn and, be in unsure environments and have to react. And, there's a play part of it that I think is often missing. And I think so critical to the sort of like joy of life and joy of aging. And that I think, sometimes in this, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, this sort of very tactical approach to longevity that many people are very focused on,
Quantified.
Yeah, quantified health. And, and I think those people are also talking about the importance of community and being around your friends. And that's, of course, important and fun. But I do think, this fun piece is so critical. And I do think being outside and taking adventures and doing adventures alone or with your friends is fun.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's so important.
It's that simple. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be fun, again. But there's something very, I want to say primal, that might be the wrong word, that harks us back to when we were kids. And they've done a lot of research on play now. And there's lots of kinds of play. But it's often bonding. That's what play does for us. It's also very holistic. It obviously often makes us move. And it also triggers all of these feelings in us, like laughter, maybe some fear, maybe exhilaration. We're being very human in that moment. And I think adults lose sight of that. And they've found that play is incredibly important for our sense of well-being. And a lot of these activities are so simple. You don't have to learn. It doesn't take a lot to get on a bike and go for a bike ride, or certainly not to walk or to even bird watch. You just have to watch. You don't have to know the birds. So when you strip away a lot of these outdoor activities, the technical aspects of it, the need to like know the exact bird, for instance, and just pare it down to its most elemental, which is being outside, doing the thing. It's fun. And we just make things too complicated as adults.
This book is great. And I love just each chapter is kind of a new story and a new personality. Did you come back after this and make any specific changes in your own life? Or did it feel like, okay, confirmation bias, like I'm sort of doing these things, or boy, I really do need to sort of be a little bit more formal in some application of these principles?
Well, the first thing, I mean, I was really kind of gobsmacked by how much I had to change my definition of adventure. Like I said, I was kind of I wanted to look at a wide range of adventures because I wanted people to get outside and to do things. But I also knew the adventure element was important because it was, again, added novelty and exhilaration and well-being. But I changed my definition of adventure. That was the biggest thing, I think. And now I feel like just going out, and I think I was doing a lot more of this as I was getting older, mostly because of time, I think, but just taking my paddleboard out in the bay right here and paddling around, maybe not even paddling around, maybe just sitting a lot, talking to my friend, Sophia, like we're just chatting. That was fulfilling and that qualified. I think I was also I very much undervalued the aspect of community with outdoor adventure. I just, most of the things I do, I learned on my own. And then peripherally, there's people who do it too. Or maybe for instance, when I fly, I don't fly with somebody, but I see people at the airport. And also, I call my partner in the gyro, Paul, and I tell him about how the flight was. There's research on not just socializing, but having a sense of belonging. That's different. It's deeper than just socializing. Like you're part of something. I think it's maybe where community meets purpose. And I found that outdoor activity gave me a lot of that. And I was just really more cognizant of that, more respectful of that.
Am I right that you have recently also taken up sailing? I feel that I have seen some sailing adventures.
Yes. Well, Beth has taken up sailing at the.
Oh, you're the passenger?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I call myself the first mate because I don't know. I unwrap the sandwiches.
You need a first mate.
Beth took it up at 59. Again, like when I started this book, I asked people, when was the last time you learned something new? And so many people my age had not. And I hadn't learned something new, I realized, in a very long time until I picked up flying a gyrocopter. A little extreme, I get it, but.
You did say there's a quote in here. It's like, it's good to suck at something. Is that what it's good to suck at something new? I think that was one of the
novelty piece.
The novelty piece. Really, we hear that. It's so easy to become, you just become competent. You go to your gym, you do your step aerobics with weights, right? You know that's CrossFit. You have your little tight thing, and it's really difficult to make yourself uncomfortable. Be vulnerable. I was just talking with Juliet that one of the things that we love to do is ask ourselves, like, what are we living for? What's the next adventure? And it frames some things for us. We have to train for this adventure. We have to kind of organize, but it also gives us something to live for a little bit. I guess I forget where I was going with this.
Oh, well, you were going to talk about, hold on. I got it. Oh, my brain just.
Bunch of 50-year-olds together. It's great. It's so great.
Julia.
Go ahead. Did you remember?
Oh, I know. It's good to suck at something. So that's a quote by Karen Rinaldi, wrote a book about learning to surf and how she's still bad at it. I totally relate to that because I'm still bad at it. But it's the elements I love. I love being out in big waves and big wind. Yeah. I go out in storms, nobody's around. And that's one reason I go, because nobody else will surf it because it's unsurfable. And I'm like, well, I probably wouldn't catch a wave anyway. So I might as well be out here in this incredibly vitalizing environment of cold water, big winds. It's kind of ridiculous. Sometimes people don't want to surf with me. But yeah, that I think one of the beauties about picking up something as we age in the outdoors is that you are less concerned about what people think of you, what you look like. Not only does the outdoors allow you to do that, because what you look like in the outdoors is often not the central factor. It's like, where are we? Darn it. I can't tell on the map. Like, that's what we're worried about. We're not worried about what we look like. So, but I think as we get older, we are really perfectly primed to enjoy an outdoor adventure in a way that we couldn't have when we were younger. Because of this, like, okay, I'm not going to be great at it because I'm already 70. So I don't have a lot of years left necessarily to become great. I don't have those, 20 years to become an amazing, whatever it is. But I can really enjoy it for its what it gives me essentially.
Yeah, and I relate to that a lot, actually. I tried to pick up mountain biking in my late 20s and early 30s, and I think I just had too much ego connected to it, and I sucked, and I didn't enjoy sucking, and I didn't want to be with, I didn't want to suck in a group. so I kind of gave it up, and it wasn't, I do think that is one real beauty of taking up some of these activities when you get older, is you just don't care what people think as much, and you're fine. And, Kelly doesn't mind waiting around for me if I suck mountain biking. And, I just went on this crazy, adventure with.
Hold up, check. When have you just dusted us yesterday?
Well, but and I just went on this crazy bikepacking trip with one of the best bikers in the world who, like many of the best, has no ego at all. And
she's stoked to have a first mate.
Yeah, she's stoked to have a first mate. She doesn't care that I suck, and or I'm a learner, whatever word we want to use for it. And so I think that is really an important point, that we just are maybe in many ways much more equipped to try new things because we don't care what people think as much.
Yeah, I mean that's what
I feel like I get some street cred. I'm usually now the oldest person or the oldest guy doing some adventures with my age cohort. I have a couple of friends who are older, but I went skiing in Japan. We did this crazy backcountry, week, and I was like the oldest by far.
Yeah, like by 10 years or something. Yeah.
But now I feel like I get credit because I'm like, well, I'm 50. You should destroy me. And then if I destroy you, then I'm like, oh, you got destroyed by a 50-year-old. That's too bad for you.
Well,
So
I mean,
I kind of feel like
it turns out being underestimated can be a superpower. I mean, it can,
Yes.
also invisibility, I guess. Being invisible is a superpower, I guess, for superheroes. But this idea, I think that people constantly are kind of amazed. Like when I roll up on my one wheel, like I start in that first chapter, they have so many preconceptions about what women
Yes.
can and cannot do at a certain age. And getting on an electric skateboard is just not one of them. And certainly not for a 60-year-old. Maybe if it was a man, there'd be, less confusion, but I can almost see people's brains needing to be rewired as they, look at me getting off my one wheel and coming towards them.
Yeah, that's
I would like to know what was most surprising. I think you said you expanded your sort
Idea
of
of
idea of
adventure.
adventure. Was there anything that really stuck out that, besides that, I mean, maybe you already answered that question, but a piece that, holy moly, I went in doing this and, something else, some other physical attribute or some aspect of these extraordinary women, because I really, this book is so perfect right now as we're building this idea of, hey, we have all these pieces and we have all this internet and we have all these access to these things theoretically. This is like this keystone, capstone piece here that I feel like really rounds out this conversation about living life and having a life of meaning. Anything else that just kind of blew your mind about these women that really was surprising?
Well, I think what blew my mind is I knew that our mindset was important. I knew our outlook was important. We've all been steeped in, you have to have a positive outlook. I had a feel, and I could see the toxicity of the messaging. I don't think I really understood how, on a really holistic level, it was damaging. I didn't really understand that it could hurt us so badly physically to have a negative view of our own
Love
aging.
that.
And I didn't realize also the positive effects of, the health effects of having a really uplifting and exploratory view of our own aging would have. And then how outdoor adventure could fit into that. I also, again, this book was a quest. So when I went on and I kept seeing these women opening up their lives in these key ways, so adding community, purpose, and health to their life through an outdoor adventure, but also completely upending their sense of themselves, I was amazed. I think it had all been working on me too, but I just, on an intuitive level, it was happening. But when I sat down and was writing it out and then exploring what these women were trying to tell me, it became very, very clear.
I love that.
So you are exactly 10 years older than me, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you think the sort of invisibility piece is changing even in the 5 years since you started and now are publishing this book, started working on this book and publishing it, do you think this perception of women, some of the sort of negative societal impressions of aging women are changing at all? Are we just at the precipice of that? Like, where do you think we are with this?
It's not changed. No, not now in this moment at all. But I will say that the women who I remember to ask this question would tell me, oh, the 60s are my favorite decade of all their decades, of the 20s, 30s, 40s, all those times where we look back nostalgically. Oh, I wish I was 20. I wish I was 30. No, these women are saying the 60s are their favorite. And so I feel like that's knowledge that we're carrying with me as we experience it. I'm going into it kind of knowing that it's going to be a great decade, but it's going to take a while because we don't, in this culture, listen to elders. We just don't. And so it's going to take a while. And, when a young person looks at me with whatever, like, she doesn't matter, she's old, what? It doesn't bother me because I was like that too. So I don't know that I didn't set out necessarily to change the minds of like a culture. I just wanted women at that moment to start embracing their own lives. And maybe that'll have a great trickle down effect. But yes, as women approach their 50s, 60s, I think that journey of self-discovery individually is happening.
The one thing I would like to do is shout out Kelly Starrett, because certainly no woman listening to this needs some man to be supporting them in doing this journey, although many people have partners. But I will say that a lot of the adventures I've been able to do are possible because I have a supportive partner. And so there's going to be a lot of men listening to this who might even want to do outdoor adventures with their spouses or partners or whoever. And, the example that I love to give is that when I started mountain biking, which I think I was 44 years old, I started mountain biking, I really seriously sucked. Like, I couldn't make it over like class 1 obstacles on my mountain bike. I was really scared. I was scared of going uphill. I was scared of going downhill. On a 45 or hour long bike ride, I probably was hiking for half the ride. And I really would not have gotten over that hump to learning if I wasn't doing it with a partner who was willing to just be like, just wait and fine. And he didn't need to be aggro and bro out. And, he just was willing to be patient. And I think, for all the people listening to this, there's if you're someone who's a supporter, a first mate, so to speak, just give people a chance to learn and grow because, now we have this thing we can do together, which we can bike pack and we can mountain bike on the weekends. And we just have this really fun outdoor activity that we can do together, in part because I said yes at the beginning.
Did you just out me for being selfish? Like I've planted the seed
no, but
and I snuck in?
I never understood like how this can only be great for all the men who want to go outside with the people they love and experience that.
There are so few women. We ride as a group, and it'll just be bros plus Juliet, right? And then all of a sudden, it really is. And I'm like, I see all these guys going past, and I'm like, none of them have their partners.
But they're out there. I think maybe to get back to the surprise part, maybe I was most surprised to see that there were more women out there than I thought. It's not that there's a lot, but there were more, and they were super badass. And I realized that it was hard to find a lot of these women. And I think part of it is that they don't maybe promote themselves like men do on social media. And part of it is the age, but also part of it is that in general, just for a long time, I didn't think any women wingsuited. I was really interested in wingsuiting. Not necessarily do myself because I was so accident prone, but I wanted to I just would watch every video. For those of you who don't know, wingsuiting, variation on base jumping, proximity flying, I guess is now the newest permutation. But I was fascinated with all it, and I never saw any women. And then, I started to do some deep research and realized, I can't remember her name. She's awesome. She's a climber. She's a big wingsuiter. They're all out there. There's not a lot of them, but they're out there. So the fact that women aren't out there they are there. They're not that much, but yes, we should be inviting them more in. Invite us in. Yeah. And if you're not an outdoors guy, do it with the woman in your life, because this book is for women, because I think really was because the psychological aspects of growing older as a woman were so different, I think, than growing older as a man, that I really felt this was a book that I had to write for women, and I wasn't qualified to write a book about outdoor adventure for men. So in terms of the mental perspective, outdoor adventure is incredibly important for women, but all the other aspects are the same for men: community, purpose, health.
Well, I just want to, before we wrap, I just want to say one of the greatest things about being in a outdoor adventure community with adults is that we're not critically poor anymore. And the food has gotten better. The adventures have gotten better. I mean, like, hang in there and do adventures with your older friends who are over 50, because they have health insurance, which is super cool.
And they don't have to eat Pop-Tarts as their only meal for 3 days.
Yes. And I'm just to say that I think about how austere my life was when I was in my 20s.
Sleeping bags. How are we warm? I don't get it.
I have
We were not warm.
And
We were
now
not
I'm
warm.
like, this is amazing. My equipment's better. My friends are better. It's the best. So I really thank you for this wonderful, wonderful book.
And then I just to sort of put a sort of, I don't know, exclamation point on the end of this conversation. If for those who've made it this far, what would you say is your like mini recipe book for someone listening who's like, yes, I want to try something new. I get it. I think this is important. Like, what do you think their next step is? What's next? What's their next first step?
One of the women that I interviewed would simply go to the internet and type in something fun to do here when she went traveling around the country, because she wanted to have a little mini adventure everywhere she went. A lot of the women use the internet, frankly, to just kind of figure out what might be on offer. I mean, I think there are outdoor people in your life, and so either approach them or say yes when they ask you. A lot of the people that were successfully staying in the outdoors did it because there were other people there. But it's also as easy as a meetup, and it's go slow, like do it slowly and just remain curious. The outside is like all around us. So there's so much opportunity and there's so much information that we have. But you could start by reading the book.
Yeah. Well, I love that. By the way, I have to just say it again because I love that Google search. Something fun to do here.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Step 1, think about adventure. Step 3, get sponsored by Red Bull. I think it's so easy. It makes total sense.
Caroline, your book, Tough Broad, it's amazing. And I think is really going to make a positive contribution to this whole extensive conversation we're all having, and thinking about how to age well and feel good in our bodies and keep our, minds active and alive. And I really think this is going to make a big difference for a lot of people, men and women alike.
Where can we find you on the socials?
CarolinePaul.com. I'm trying to be better socially, but I'm usually outside. What can I say? CarolinePaul.com is my website. And then I'm easy to find on Instagram and Facebook. I don't have any other things that I know of. I think I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't. Yeah, sorry, you guys.
Hold on to your butt.
Yeah.
You're going to be on LinkedIn
more. Let's go. Caroline, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ready State Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, check out all our episodes here or at thereadystate.com. And be sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes to help others find our show.
Check us out and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Ready State.
Until next time, cheers, everyone.
You got it. You better stop